the secret of the old house. Deep in the forest stood an old house, covered in the cobwebs of time and the dust of oblivion. The wooden shutters creaked in the wind, and the windows, like eyes, stared into the void, reflecting no light. In the village, it was called the House of Fear, and no one dared approach it after sunset. One evening, a young couple, Lisa and Dan, decided to spend the weekend in this area. They had heard the local legends but considered them mere tales. Intrigued by the stories about the old house, they decided to explore it. As they approached the house, they felt an inexplicable heaviness, as if an invisible force was trying to hold them back, but curiosity proved stronger. With difficulty they opened the creaky door and found themselves in a dusty hall where time seemed to have stood still. Lisa shone her flashlight into the dark corners, discovering old photographs and furniture covered in a thick layer of dust. "Look at this place. It's amazing," whispered Lisa, examining an old family portrait on the wall. Dan, more practical, began to explore the house. His attention was drawn to a massive wooden hatch in the floor of the living room. It seemed to lead to the basement. Dan cautiously opened it, and a sinister smell of damp and mold hit his nose. "Dan, maybe we shouldn't go down there," Lisa suggested nervously. But Dan, driven by curiosity, was already descending the stairs to the basement. Lisa, unwilling to stay alone, followed him. The basement was huge, its walls covered in ancient manuscripts and strange symbols. In the corner stood an old chest, locked with a massive padlock. "It looks like we found something interesting," said Dan, trying to open the lock. After several minutes of effort, the lock gave way, and the chest's lid opened. Inside, they found an old doll wrapped in yellowed newspaper. Suddenly, the basement filled with icy cold, and a creepy whisper filled the air. "You shouldn't have touched that," a voice from the darkness said. Lisa and Dan turned around but saw no one. Fear gripped their hearts. They dropped the doll and ran to the stairs, but the hatch door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The basement was plunged into darkness, and the only source of light was Lisa's flickering flashlight. "We need to find another way out," Dan said, trying to stay calm. They began to explore the basement in search of an exit. Soon they stumbled upon an old door leading to a small room. Maps and documents hung on the walls, and in the center stood an altar with a dark crystal. Lisa approached and saw an inscription on the wall: "Here lies a power not meant for the living." Suddenly, the crystal began to glow, and a ghost of a little girl appeared before them. Her eyes were empty, and her face was contorted in a grimace of pain. "Help me," she whispered. Dan and Lisa realized that the spirit of the girl had been trapped there by an ancient ritual. They had to free her to break the house's curse. Dan took the crystal, and the girl pointed to the altar. "Break it," she said. Without hesitation, Dan smashed the crystal against the stone altar. Suddenly, the basement filled with light, and the ghost of the girl vanished. Lisa and Dan felt the walls of the basement begin to shake, and they barely managed to escape from the room. When they finally emerged from the basement, the house began to collapse. They ran outside and watched as the old house disappeared in a cloud of dust. Lisa and Dan, trembling from fear and cold, vowed never to return to this cursed place. Since then, according to local legend, the house vanished from the forest, leaving only an empty clearing and an inexplicable sense of dread in those who dared to approach the place.